So let's start.
Yeah, okay.
I want you to talk about um why just let's why'd you get in the business?
Why'd I get in the business?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
talk about your history. What led you into like let's do coffee. Like why is coffee a good idea? Why were you passionate about it? And then what did you do in advance of basically starting store one?
Yeah, right. So and of course you'll make fun of me, but I grew up in
As
Europe. I
always, I
grew up
hope.
on good coffee, right? And my dad worked for Ford Motor Company. That's why we lived overseas. It was nothing more than that. But I was always meant to go to a U.S. university. I came back. I was supposed to go to U of M, but apparently I enjoyed my senior year too much, and they uninvited their acceptance of me. And so I went to the runner-up college at Michigan State University. Went there to become an engineer for, about 4.5 minutes. And because, I realized I was nothing like an engineer. Didn't know what I wanted to do, floundered through school, basically dropped out. And, up until dropping out, my dad was paying for college. So it's kind of a fortunate, unfortunate kind of thing. But then, I went to go work in a restaurant as a dishwasher. And that kind of set me straight at 3.35 an hour that like, well, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life either.
A
And
lot of
so
hard work.
it's a really hard work. And
Yeah.
that was at a Big Boy restaurant, by the way. I don't even know if they're still around, but um, it took me forever to become a cook for 5 cents more. So for 3.40, I could put on a little chapeau and a kerchief and flip burgers. But I went back to school, managed to get into the business school. I don't think I could get in there today. I mean, my GPA was like 2.5 or something like that. I think the standard's much higher. And stumbled through business school a little bit until I figured out that, hey, it kind of makes sense to do hospitality business because I was already working in the restaurant business. Somewhere in there, I flipped concepts and I went over to a restaurant called the Flapjack Shack, where I started as a prep cook. And then I was going to school, getting my hospitality business degree. The long and short of it is it took me 8 years to get my 4-year degree. But by the time I graduated, and I did quite well in school at that point because I was sort of motivated and I had this like really practical side and this really academic side, and they really gelled well together. And I discovered later in life that I need a lot of stuff to do. I need a lot of shit to do in order to keep my brain going. So, I was a kid that grew up kind of like all over the world. I'm not bragging. That's just what happened. There I was living in East Lansing, and I'm like, I'm getting the F out of here. And the people that I worked for at this pancake house, family restaurant, said, hey, we would love to expand this concept. They just had one. And I said, well, hey, that's interesting because I'd like to own my own restaurant. That's all I wanted to do. And so we shook hands and agreed that I would help them grow and they would help me own my first restaurant. And that's what happened. In 1991, I opened my own flapjack restaurant after opening two more for them. They honored their word and all that kind of stuff.
That was at Waverly and 496.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Waverly in 496. It was amazing. 1.6 million in 1991 dollars. It is a shit ton of eggs, bacon, sausage, pancakes. There's no alcohol in that business, so you have to understand that was a lot of skin in that moment in time. It was a super busy restaurant.
You were doing it. You were making that go. You were making
Totally,
that happen. Yeah.
totally. I was
Totally invigorating.
happy as a pig in shit. I
Yeah.
mean, just seriously, owning my own restaurant, I don't know, somewhere around 28, 27, 28, something like that. And I was the boss of my applesauce and I was making money.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't ask me, well, why'd you get out of that? Because they think I got out in order to do specialty coffee, which was a solution. But the reason I got out is I kind of got screwed, right? And here I was working in this concept, put my blood, sweat, and tears in it. I was essentially managing all four units in some ways. I was like a district manager, but also owning my own, really driving the ship, the menu development, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, God, I'm putting a lot of me in this, and I don't own the name. So I went to them and said, hey, listen, because the Flapjack was actually owned, the name was owned by Bud Wasson's sister, the guy I worked for. And I said, why don't you go up and ask your sister if we can get the rights to the name, at least in the mid-Michigan area. That way we can expand and I can know that all this blood, sweat, and tears I'm putting in this concept is going to be worthwhile, you know? So they did, they trotted off, and they came back and they had big smiles on their face, and they said, well, we got that deal done. We got that deal done. I'm like, cool, where do I sign? And they're like, no, 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 we got that done. We got that done, but you're not in on that. And I'm
Right.
like, whoop, like
Cool.
a light switch went on for me, and I was out. And so about 6 to 9 months later, I left. But the thing I was inspired by is in downtown East Lansing, there was this little closet that opened up, and it was a concept called a Espresso Royale. It wasn't even a big cafe. Maybe it had 2 tables. Espresso Royale was out of Ann Arbor, a really visionary kind of guy. His name was Marcus. And I'm like, huh, specialty coffee for real? I mean, it's 1993, 4 at this point. I mean, people haven't even heard of specialty coffee. At best, they heard of gourmet coffee, which meant like hazelnut flavored drip coffee and stuff like that. And I started doing some research, and I came across this book. I don't even know what it's called, but it spoke to megatrends that were happening. And the megatrend in the
I think it was
90s,
called Megatrends.
it might have been called megatrends. It makes sense. Probably why I remember it, you know? Anyway, megatrends was basically saying people are getting more discretionary income in the United States. They're traveling more, they're exposed to more, and they're kind of moving from quantity of purchases to quality of purchases. So I'm like, this specialty coffee thing could be something, you know? So I sold the business in 1993, the Flapjack, and I got the flock out of there, as they say. And I took a year off. Within that year, I had more than one concept in mind, but within that year, Mary and I actually, because we own that together, we own that Flapjack together, our business partner in BIGGBY initially, Beaners at that time. We went on a road trip. We sort of sifted through these ideas. In the end, we landed on specialty coffee, and we kind of just like hung a right in the United States somewhere and traveled out to Seattle, hung out there for about 3 months, and just went to, you know, most people consider that the birthplace of specialty coffee. Just went to independent cafes and roasters and stuff, learned as much as I could. I was well versed in the food service business, but just not the QSR end of it, and certainly not the specialty coffee end of
What
it.
was that guy's name? The guy at
Huh.
Arabica Coffee. Was it Arabica Coffee? Is that what it was called? We first bought our coffee from before Paramount.
So no, it wasn't Arabica, which is the wrong pronunciation of it. Arabica was actually a chain in Cleveland.
Yeah.
But
What was the name of
uh,
the roaster though?
well, initially it was Austin Chase, and then later it was Endicott Coffee.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
Austin Chase. And what
And
was the dude's name though that you know you went and worked with, and he was like I mean, a freakazoid when it came to coffee, like
oh,
such an
totally.
attention to detail. What was his name? Can't remember, huh?
Well, there's David Schomer.
Yeah, that's maybe who I'm thinking about.
Yep.
Yep. All right.
And he owned Vivace Coffee. So we
That's
never
what I
did
was trying
business
to
with
remember
him,
is
but
that was the brand I was trying to remember. Okay, good.
and I'd met all those people by going to something called a coffee fest in like late 1993. And Coffee Fest was like a seminar on how to do specialty coffee. This was in Philadelphia. And I was inspired by all those guys. And yeah, that's the thing that made me come back and write a business plan. So I got into
But
specialty coffee for 2 reasons. One, I love coffee, because this is
yeah.
the original question, right? I love
Yeah,
coffee.
yeah. I mean, there's 2 things I want to mention that I want to circle back to.
Okay.
One is, and we will, you know, I'm going to let you finish the story, but one is the rights to the IP. And I want to talk
Mhm.
about that for a quick second. And then I want to talk about you and Mary Roselle in a car together for like 30 hours. Because
Oh.
I mean, holy shit, how you guys did that. Who will use, as she would say. Anyway, go ahead. So you had 2 reasons you went into specialty coffee.
One, I loved coffee. I mean, I
Yep.
really did. I love good
Still
coffee.
do.
And
Yep.
I never thought that, you know, that could exist in the United States. We're talking Maxwell House, Folgers, 8 o'clock, you know, that kind of thing, shit that came in a can and had been roasted 8 months ago and was the cheapest coffee in the world and it was burnt,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, I'd given up all hope is the way to say that. So that's one reason. But the other one was, you know, I did love the food service business, But the one I was operating was really complicated. You know, like you needed a host, you needed a busboy, a dishwasher, a prep cook, a line cook, a head cook, an assistant manager, a manager. You needed all these different positions. I don't know if I said busser, but you need a busser too. And it was a
Well,
very
you said bus boy. I was going to correct you to busser.
busser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Very complicated business to run
very.
with
Not a
very
great margin,
low
right?
margins, right? And here I'm looking at this concept, and as long as you can kind of get over the threshold, because you know a cup of coffee is kind of expensive in specialty coffee, and but you got to sell a lot of them in order to hit that little break even number, right? So you got to hit it out of the park that way, but very simple business to operate. Basically, you hired one position, you taught them three different trades. There was cash, there was shot puller, there was milk steamer. And then there might be increasing levels of responsibility from that, but it wasn't like there were all these different positions. And so it was a really simple business to operate, and it was high margin, although it also takes high volume in order to make that work.
Yeah.
So those are the two reasons. It looked like a winner.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to tell people, it didn't take a rocket scientist in 1995, 96 to see what was going to happen in specialty coffee, though, too. I mean, it was a lot of hard work that went into it, but the fundamentals were right, as you're referencing. But then, boy, was it coming. It was like a train coming down the tracks at you in so many ways.
It's the same thing, the freight train for sure.
But yeah, to go back, I just want to comment on the IP because your experience there with Bud and Eleanor in relation to the IP, I think was one of the things that I guess this is more of a question, but I think I know the answer, is when we got into our work together and putting the company together and, forming Global Orange as an entity to hold the intellectual property. And, I brought up the fact that I wanted to be involved in that company too, as,
Right.
that wasn't like a hard swallow moment for you. You were like, yeah,
Sure.
I get it. But, and if you're going to put your soul into this thing over the next, whatever, 10, 20 years, you got to have a piece of the IP too. And so I just, I go back to that day. That was instrumental because I knew like I wasn't going to move forward without the IP. Like just same as you weren't going to move forward with Flapjack without the IP. So I mean, my hat's off to them for screwing you.
And it was weird because I mean they were good people otherwise, but there was just this one little thing, and I couldn't deal with that. And but in the end, any concept, what is it? I mean, it's a brand that is associated to IP that has systems, whether they're marketing systems or operating systems, but the value in the brand is in the IP in the end.
Well, I mean, 45% of the value of our company is attributed simply purely only to the brand.
That's right.
And that, I mean, it's a staggering number, right?
Yeah.
I've got a story. I went to right before BIGGBY. I don't think I've ever told you this story. I had worked for these guys in Kalamazoo that were own a hockey store, golf and hockey store. It was like perfect for me, And I called them up and we were talking about how I wanted to come work for them and get involved in their business. So long story short, we got everything figured out kinda, but they had this old pickup truck, right? This old brown pickup truck. And I wanted them to throw that into the deal. I wanted them to throw that into the deal because I wanted to drive that old pickup truck. And
Sure.
I needed a car too or something, whatever. And they said no. This pickup truck was probably worth like $1,500 or whatever, $2,000 max. And they said no. They said no, they didn't, whatever. And I look back on that, and had they given me that damn that pickup truck, I would have gone to work for them. I probably would never even have been a part of BIGGBY Coffee.
Different trajectory altogether.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
These little things that happen. And then I think it's really prudent for us to spend some time honoring and talking about Mary. You know, I made a joke out of it, like two of you guys in a car together for 30 hours, you know, like put a bullet in my brain kind of thing,
Yeah,
you know. But and I'm saying that in a loving way, right? Both of your energies are frenetic. You know, it's you know, that's why I say put a bullet in me. Although, you know, what I wouldn't give to go back and have a 3 hour car ride with the two of you and talk about everything right now.
true.
But
Yeah,
so talk to me about the Mary dynamic, what she brought to the business. You know, I have my opinions too in terms of what she offered us and how she supported our growth and so on. But you know, let's take a minute and just talk about her. And I think it's important for people to understand the history and you know how Mary was part of it.
totally agree. So I actually hired Mary at the Flapjack, right? And so many people that I hired there later became connected to the business, including Mary. But we have a franchisee, Mohammed Shataya. He was a general manager of a Flapjack on our behalf. There was another guy, his name was Jamie Eads, and he became a manager too. And they came back into our fold under BIGGBY later on. But I hope it speaks to sort of just like the kind of people that we all are, right? This idea of common goals and objectives and beliefs and values and stuff like that. But I hired Mary. She was in the hospitality school as well. She was older, and it was living her second life, basically. Her kids were off to college. The last one was going through, I believe, gym. And she had put, you know, as a single mother, put them through school and provided them a stable life and all that kind of thing by working at the Michigan Supreme Court. And so uh, as as that as that was sunsetting, that is the raising of her kids, she's like, I need to decide what to do in life. She decided to go back to school and was in the hospitality school. So in the hospitality school, you have to do something called a PWE, a professional work experience, which is where you go out and you find some manager-ish kind of role and that you get paid for, and then you end up writing a report on in the end. And so I hired her as a hostess, is what they called it at that time, a host. I think it's the more generic term, people that greet you at the door and see you. And but Mary was super high energy. I mean, like a freaking whirlwind. And you know, like I don't even believe that people can multitask, but Mary Roselle could multitask, like seriously. So, you know, that was one of her great assets. But the other one, she had concentration powers. I mean, I can literally see her like this, reading contracts, reading operations manuals or whatever. But she had this ability to focus, but also just focus in on the details and organize those in such a fashion that I've never really seen anybody else like that, right? And I don't know, that's like from her attorney years, and she wasn't an attorney, but working with attorneys in the Supreme Court and that kind of thing. But that was a superpower for her. Unbridled energy, unbridled optimism, willing to take a leap of faith, courageous, could easily be like, I don't care what other people think, I'm doing this kind of thing. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
she was magical. I mean, without Mary, I don't think I would have owned that first restaurant, and that I wouldn't have necessarily been able to single-handedly, or I didn't single-handedly, we did it together, but I couldn't have single-handedly done it. It definitely required the partnership with Mary,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So my experience with Mary was she hired me, you know. I walked into the first BIGGBY store and I applied for a job. She interviewed me and she hired me. And I started working with her directly. So I worked Monday through Friday, open to 2 p.m. And that experience there is the experience that got me inspired about the quote organization. Because I mean, she had it so well ironed out in terms of her approach to running the business, to managing the business. I'm talking out front, like on the floor.
Yeah.
Like she had that so well ironed out that you know, and I thrived in that environment. I loved that I knew exactly what I was supposed to be doing, exactly how I was supposed to do everything. There was never a question. If you had a question, all you had to do was ask, and she'd tell you. She would tell you, right, what the answer was. And so,
Yeah.
you know, for me, that worked in my little pea pod here, and I
Mm,
thrived on it. And then so much of, you know, our operations manual that we wrote was really documenting her,
yeah.
at least from an out front perspective, you know. And so it was a beautiful thing. And she drove so many people crazy working with her because she was just so fixated on the you know, extraordinary detail, extraordinary. And
Yeah.
but you know, I thrive there. I love that, right? And so that's why we worked well together. But the other thing I always said about Mary was, you know, if you and I at some moment in the development of the business said to Mary, "Hey, Mary, be really helpful if you'd walk to Chattanooga." I mean,
She,
she wouldn't have asked.
yeah.
You know, she was that committed. She would have sat down, she would have laced up her runners and like started walking to Chattanooga.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she would literally have done anything to build the business. And you know that it was such, it was really inspiring to me to see somebody that was that committed. And I
Yeah.
think it was a great lesson because I believe that's what it takes. I do, you know, I believe it takes that level of commitment to your business, and sort of the fundamentals of the business is really what she was committed to, you know.
Totally.
So um
Totally. Now, I mean, unfortunately, you know, what works for you can sometimes only take you so far, and then you know you got to develop a little bit more, and so on and so forth. That became a difficulty later on, but in the early years, it was just an amazing asset.
yeah, especially in the development of a franchise company, right? It's because so much of it was about following the system, executing the system, and so on. And I mean, I still think we lean on that system dramatically
Yeah.
today, but there had to be some nuance to it, and that wasn't Mary's strong suit. You know, that was the,
I just want to share one thing, and you might have to pick up the story. But you know, one of the duties in those days was to go back and balance a drawer at the end of the day. You know and if it was off by a penny, I mean, Mary wasn't like, well, you know, screw the penny, or you know, pull a penny out of your own pocket and put it in there. Just to, I mean, she could have done that. She could have done that. But I mean, she would come busting through that swing door, and she would start tearing apart the cash. I mean, like lifting it up and lifting the drawer up and
for a penny.
crawling on the floor looking for that penny.
Oh,
You
I mean,
know,
that is not an exaggeration. I lived that.
it is
I
not.
mean, she would tear the store apart to find a
Yep.
penny. And it,
Yep.
you know, so another quick Mary story. So I got, after our walk, which I presume we're going to get into here at some point, but after our walk, and I committed full time to the business, and I became the assistant manager of store one. I closed the store, and Mary opened the store.
Mhm.
And so I'll never forget one of my first closings. I came in the next day at 3 o'clock for the next closing, and I had a list of seven. I can't remember exactly, but I mean, it was like
Yep.
17, 20, 25 things
Yeah.
that were wrong with the closing. And I mean, I'm talking about the salt shaker goes on the left, not the right, you know, that kind of detail. And
Yep.
that's no exaggeration. And so I was like, holy smokes. And then I committed myself. I committed myself to never have a list ever again. Now, it took me a while. I didn't get it out of the gate, right? I mean, it took me a while. But every time there was an item on the list, there would never be that again, you know, like that's just the way it was. And I remember there was a night I stayed there till like 3 in the morning.
Oh, geez.
Just, I mean, just getting it right.
Yeah.
We had a particularly bad night, you know, whatever. And but anyway, I remember the day I came in, and my commitment to myself was 3 days in a row with no list from Mary was the
Right.
victory. And I don't know, it probably took me a month or two to get that done. But the day I got it done, boy, it was a celebration, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I put it in her face too. I mean, you know, that was the thing. We used to talk so much, so you know, we used to chirp each other so much on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that was invigorating, but you know, at that moment, trying to be perfect. That was what was invigorating.
Yeah, you know, I mean, because the industry at that point, like in the greater Lansing area, which is where we were operating, was a bunch of independent operators. And so like that first wave of coffee shop owners didn't have that like food service background, that level of intensity, that level of manuals or portion control or anything like that. And very early on, it felt like that became one of our competitive advantages, was the fact that there were any kind of system
Oh,
whatsoever.
there's no, I mean, the way I say that is that we were a coffee shop built on a high volume restaurant platform, period.
So,
And that was it. That
yeah,
was the advantage. I mean,
yeah,
we were running that thing like a high volume kitchen,
yeah.
not a quaint, cute little coffee shop, you know? Yeah. Okay. So you opened then. Okay. So you and Mary, you opened.
Yep,
And it was in the Arby's, the old Arby's location next to the People's Church, McDonald's, that whole thing.
yep.
Remember? So just give us a little bit of coloration around the opening. Like what was that like? You know,
Yeah, it was really horrible. And I mean that it's really
I
horrible.
mean that in the best way, but no, it
I
was really
do,
horrible.
I do. I had, since coming to East Lansing, all this innate success, that if I just threw myself into it, that I could end up running a restaurant, I could end up owning a restaurant, I could end up taking care of a bunch of restaurants, and it just felt like my trajectory was like boop, like that. And then I opened this brand, but that isn't a brand yet, to an absolute resounding thud. And there were two things going on there. One, it was a completely new industry to the consumer. I mean, it took so much unbelievable consumer education to teach people what a specialty coffee shop was about. A, and B, nobody knew who the hell we were, and nobody cared. I mean, who gives a shit
That's
that some coffee shop opens up down the road? Like, you got to give them a reason to care, And we had all the manuals and all the portion control and all the management skills and all that kind of thing, but it was an absolute resounding thud. And I mean, we burned through cash. Like, I had some money in a checking account, gone, savings account, gone. I had 3 credit cards with like a $20,000 max on each of them, tapped all those out. And then finally I sell my cars and borrow a car to go to work. And then finally we have to like fire a whole bunch of people because we just couldn't afford to have people around. And,
what
I
was that?
think you
What was that
entered.
length of time? I mean, from the day you opened until when you had to fire all those people, and you know,
Yeah, it was about 6 months.
okay.
Like I kept thinking if I work hard and, kick some ass here, I'm going to turn this thing around. And it just didn't happen. And, we referred to that. I remember it's like the worst day of my life to let these people go because they all cared and they were all doing a good job. And I mean, they didn't do anything wrong,
All right.
but referred to that as our Black Tuesday. It's
Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
horrible.
Um, yeah. So, and you're talking about the, yeah, go through the fake it till you make it piece. Like, I love that. I
Take it
love
to
that
you.
story.
Yeah.
Steam wands, wiping the counter, that whole program. I've got my version of that story,
Yeah.
that I tell about you, but I want to hear it from you right now.
Yeah, I mean, we had a parking lot which was kind of unique in East Lansing. It was a college town, right? And one of the way people
Pretty big
judge you,
parking lot too.
it was a big one.
Yeah.
But I remember people driving by because it was only like 25 miles an hour in front of that road, and the front of the place was all glass. I could literally see them turning their head to see if there was anybody in the parking lot, right? If there's anybody in the store, because that's the way consumers operate. If they see that other people are going, well, then they'll give it a try too. But they're going to be first. I mean, there's a certain kind of person that might want to be the first, but that's not what we're talking about
Yeah.
here.
That's the weirdo.
So I started having the staff, like what you do normally with staff is you say, hey, park in the back and save all the good spots for the customer. I'm like, park up front. And sure as shit, people would drive by and then they would see a couple cars. And so people started coming in. But actually there was nobody there, right? And so you'd walk in, you would realize that there's nobody there. But then, yeah, for sure. I mean, we had the steam ones going and pressing the buttons to espresso the espresso and wiping the counters like we had just finished the biggest rush because we could see these people about ready to walk in. And the intimation there was, whew, I'm glad you got here now because we were really busy a moment ago, you know?
You never said it.
No,
You just gave the
no,
feeling. Yeah,
no.
yeah. That's the whole fake it till
Oh,
you make it.
totally.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, and there's a certain kind of customer that'll ask you a question and they'll
yeah,
be like, so how you doing? And
yeah,
it's like that, when's your funeral?
yeah,
That's sort of the question. And that's where the little white lie had to emerge.
yeah.
And the white lie was, wow, man, we're doing much better than we expected. I mean, and that is ill-defined and a perfect answer. And it's,
What do you say to somebody that's like, oh, well, you built, because I face this question, when I do speaking gigs and stuff, like the whole fake it till you make it concept and how important that is.
yeah,
And what do you say to people that are like, well, that's disingenuous?
yeah, it's disingenuous, but what you're doing is you're marketing, right? And I'm not suggesting that marketing is fakery or anything like that, but both your staff and your consumer absorb energy from you. And I think what we're saying is that your energy, if you want your consumer's energy and your staff's energy to be high, even though you're getting your ass kicked every day, that's the part that you're faking, is you're getting your ass kicked every day with, bill collectors and I mean, construction started in front of us. I mean, like our air conditioner failed, and every day you'd come in and there'd be this traumatic thing happening. Is you got to show up like it's the best day of your life
Yeah,
every day,
yeah,
and that's the part that you're faking, right? And is it disingenuous? Well, here's the deal. If you tell people that your life sucks, they're not coming back,
all right.
you know? And they might like your product and all this kind of stuff, but people want to come in and get lifted up, not brought down,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
they want to they want to align with the winner, that whole thing, right? Like
Totally.
when you
Yeah.
so here we are, you and then you built it, you built it
Mhm.
one cup at a time, let's get into fall of 96. I enter
Yeah.
as a barista. Mary interviews me. I start working the open to 2 p.m. shift with her. No intention of being in the coffee business full time, long
Right.
term, right?
This is a placeholder for you.
Yeah. And I was preparing to go back to graduate school. I had a really cool research project I was working on there. And I'd leave the store. I'd go to the university. I'd leave the store at 2. I'd get to the university at 2:30-ish and work for like 3, 4, 5 hours there. Anyway, so that was my life. And people will ask me like, hey, what what made you what made you be interested in the business? Like,
Mm.
you didn't, the sale didn't come because you weren't interested in the business. I said, well, it's really two things.
Mm.
I'm going to call it three. I'm going to divide it into three. One, I enjoyed the business. You know, I enjoyed showing up to work being a barista. I really did. I mean,
There's
I
an
thrived on
intensity
it.
to it.
What's that?
There's an intensity to it.
Yeah, it's
There's no doubt
awesome.
about it.
You get
Yeah.
to make people happy too. Like, how much fun was that? Every people who come in, you get to like, engage and tell Joe, like it was fun. It was fun making people happy. Two, I sensed an opportunity in the industry. Like I said, it didn't take a rocket scientist to look around and be like, ooh, this thing's probably got some legs, this
Yeah.
coffee thing. But three, and I think most importantly, I recognized that you and Mary were doing something very, very different in the coffee space than anybody else.
Yeah, for sure.
And this was that concept of running a coffee shop on the platform of a high volume restaurant, in a high volume restaurant kitchen. Like, let's make product quickly, let's make it consistently, let's like efficiently, and so on. So and I kind of went through this transition from, this is just a fun job, to, hey, I'm going to make this thing my whole life. And the pivotal moment on that was the walk. And
Yeah.
so how we did that, and I'll just try to give a little background, is you Mary were opening a second store.
Correct.
And Mary had gone to you and said, hey, I think I might have a guy that might be candidate for running, maybe running that second store.
Yeah.
You had a GM in place at that particular moment.
Oh, I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Hyde was his name.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so good guy.
Hmm.
Remember him? He was happy and fun and what he fit the culture.
He
No doubt
did.
about it. And so you and Mary set up an interview, and the thing I find fascinating about this now, looking back on it, is we didn't know each other.
Nope.
I mean, we didn't, because you were working the 3 p.m. to close.
And
Uh,
closed was 11 p.m. at that time, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, and Tim and Mary were working the opening with
Yep.
me, right?
Yep.
And she was training him to be the GM, and so you and I sit down and as in sort of like a job interview kind of format, and we didn't know each other. I mean,
Nope.
we met. I think you made me some coffees a few times because I'd
Mhm.
spin through the store on my way to drive back home after my work at the university, and I'd
Yeah.
see you then. But we never. I don't think we'd ever even worked a shift together at that
Nope.
point.
No.
So we we don't do interviews very well. And so all we did is pop up, and it was a beautiful spring day in March of 1997.
Yeah.
We jump up, we go for a long walk, right?
Yeah.
3 4 hour walk
Yeah.
around East Lansing, just talking about everything. And yeah, I would give my left pinky toe to have a recording of that conversation,
I know. I know. I
What
know.
in the hell happened in
Over
that conversation that led us to, I mean, essentially shake hands at the end of it and say, "Hey, we're gonna become partners on this thing."
completely.
That's mind blowing now. I mean, you look back and that's mind blowing.
People still don't believe it,
I know.
but it's the absolute truth.
Remember how pissed Mary was? Because I mean, she had something she had to do, and she
Oh
was
yeah,
covering your
where the
shift.
hell have you been? You know, that kind of thing.
You
Yeah.
remember how mad she was?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there she was. She's thinking this interview is going to take 30, 40 minutes. And we
Yeah.
stroll back in 3 and a half, 4 hours later. And I mean, she was, oh boy, was she hot.
No, for sure. I mean she opened the store. So I mean that's like a 5 a.m. call right there. And it was a long day for her. And, she spent a lot of energy. I gotta tell you, I mean, she had great eye for talent. And that's what she saw in you. And but that walk was magical, and I don't know exactly what we talked about either. But in the end, we basically just shared stories about each other and how we grew up and what we were up to and that kind of thing. And in the end, it was about like one part ambition, one part values, one part beliefs, and opportunity, right? Willing
Yeah.
to swing the bat. And in many ways, too, neither of us had anything to lose. You know what I mean? Like to do this, to swing the bat on this, there was no real downside. That's sort of the beauty of early entrepreneurialism is that, uh, you know, uh, I forget. I think it's Janis Joplin says that freedom is just having nothing left to lose. Right? That's freedom. We had that entrepreneurial freedom at that moment.
Yeah. I one of my very first shifts, I was broke. I mean, broke.
I don't think I was much better. I had a
I
cafe.
know you
I
weren't.
don't think I was much better.
I know.
Mhm.
And I was rolling over mortgage payments. I didn't have health insurance. I mean,
Mhm.
I was broke.
Yeah.
And I remember on my very first, one of no, it was my very first shift that I could get tips. So you had to come off like, training and whatever.
Yeah.
And I got $17 in tips. Okay. 17. So I'm walking from our store over to my office at the university. I stop in the Union. I go into one of the stalls to go to the bathroom. And I take that money out of my pocket because I didn't know how much was there. And I count it. Right? I
Yeah.
got $17. And I think I set it up on top of like the toilet paper dispenser or something. And when I take care of my business and I'm out, I get about 40 steps outside of the Union.
Oh shit.
And I look down, or I feel that I left the money sit on top of the toilet paper dispenser. So I mean, I book back. Because $17 might as well have been a million at that point,
Yeah.
right? Like I could
Yeah.
put gas in my car, I could buy a sandwich. And
Yeah.
so I book back and I get to that stall and it's gone.
Yeah.
Oh God, I tell you what, that was devastating to me. Anyway, so we go on this walk, and we shake hands at the end of it, and then yeah, I think I became I mean pretty quickly I relieved you as the closing person. That
Yeah.
was yeah. So you could focus on the development of store two downtown. And so at that point, I'll never forget. I mean, our franchise owners will should relate to this, which is I called you the day we sold 300 cups for the first time.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. I think it was
That's big.
313.
Yeah.
We went over 300 for the first time. We went to 313, and I remember calling you at 11 whatever time it was, saying, "Holy shit, man!" You know. And so like that was the craziest. That was the crazy to think about that now today. I mean, to cross that, and by the way, we're probably our ABC was probably 270 or something
Oh my,
crazy.
so low, so low in comparison.
And the 270 maybe even be a stretch. So then what? So then we and then
Well,
we
so that's important, but and then we as important is what I'm saying. But I think it's relevant for people to know a little bit about your trajectory that got you to the point that you were in East Lansing without a buck working on some research project. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
okay.
So because I mean you swung the bat and earned a lot of money. You
Yeah, I
also
did.
got fired from something, but I mean, like I think all that is really cogent to this moment in time because we shook hands. You know the amount of trust that that takes to shake hands on something like that, and then I'm counting 30 years because that I've been in the business because I actually started in 1994, even though the store opened in 1995. So like being 30 years out for me, and to have this moment happen where we shook hands, and then everything that we talked about happened.
And more,
What's
by the
what
way.
and more, but what's the stuff that brought you to there? And like based on what I know, it'd be really hard to shake hands and trust at that moment.
Yeah, you know, so yeah, I mean, quick backstories. I had a pretty extraordinary upbringing, similar to you, in that I had opportunities presented to me. I mean, we both came from privileged backgrounds. We
Mhm.
both came upper middle class backgrounds, not wealth, not silver spoon kind of thing, but
Yeah.
really extraordinary experiences were provided to both of us. You lived all over the world. Um, I grew up in a magical place, and my parents sent me around the world when I was 15 years old on a sailing ship, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And I was fortunate to get into K College, which I love. By the way, Liam got into K College this week.
Oh,
Isn't
congratulations.
that
Oh
amazing?
my God.
Yeah.
That's so great.
I don't know if he's going to go,
What?
but I don't. We'll see,
I
right?
know we can't. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I know. I mean, of
can't
course,
make
I
them.
want him to, but
Yeah,
well, that's pretty cool. Dylan went there,
I know.
it's a so anyway, sidetrack. So I get into K College, and that in and of itself, I love that school. I love the experience and so on. I get out of school, I go take a straight commission sales job,
Yeah.
working for my uncle, and that I people will ask me if I want to prepare to be an entrepreneur, what should I do? And
Yeah.
my answer is always one, take a class in bookkeeping at your local community college. Two,
Yeah.
two, get a straight commission sales job.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't need anything else. Figure out how
Yeah.
to sell shit and keep your money organized. So anyway, I had success in that job, that sales job. I really enjoyed that.
No, huge
Yeah.
success. I
Yeah. I
mean,
mean, yeah, my first,
in
my first,
Houston, Texas. Like I can't imagine moving from Michigan to Houston. Then
yeah,
even now even culturally just really different.
yeah,
But the idea that the only way to make money is to wake up, put your shoes on, put your pants on, go out the door and sell shit.
sell shit. Yeah.
You know,
And I was really routinized. So like I would sit the night before. This is before GPS and before cell phones and so on. So I would sit with a map the night before and map out. I would 20 locations a day. I would
yeah,
visit 20 locations a day, and I wouldn't go home until I had done that, right? And I was so highly routinized, and I just executed and executed and executed. And what that led to was two things. One, I was the fastest growing territory in the company. There was 110 territories in the United States. And I think by my ninth month or 12, between 9 and 12 months, I was the fastest growing territory out of every territory. I didn't even know that. until I went
Yeah.
to some sales meeting, and then they like called me up to do an impromptu, like, hey, and because all I was doing was working, and building that business, and so, but I
Well,
also made a hundred.
wait. I have to give some context here because I mean, you were serving gift shops basically,
Yeah.
and you were making money selling like friggin' nutcrackers. You know what I
Oh, no,
mean?
no, no. I mean, better than that. I mean, I was selling like Christmas tree ornaments, and I was
Yeah,
selling
I
like
mean, who the
nativity
hell shows
scenes.
up I mean, we're not talking about, like in today's world selling some new software program or something. You're
Yeah.
selling
Well, in fairness,
Christmas ornaments,
in fairness, I had two of the nicest brands in that industry. In
That's
this,
generous though. It's still,
yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. But people wanted to buy this stuff. I mean,
yeah,
they did. They bought a
yeah.
lot of it, and it was a bit of a surprise to me when I got into that business, right? But so in my first year, I made $113,000, right? As a kid, and this is 1990, right?
Yeah.
No, 93. Sorry, 93. And so that's a lot of money, and I was killing it, But then I just decided like I didn't want to make Houston my home, like I was away from I'm super close to my family and my brothers, and I just didn't want to make Houston my home. So I moved home. I moved back to Detroit. I took a job at a Fortune 500 company in a sales position, lasted 9 months, got fired. Uh, and I could tell stories all day about
But
that.
but give us the essence of why you got fired though. I
Okay.
mean, because I think that company culture speaks to a lot of what we're up to
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I mean, they had this culture of like work hard, play hard,
Mhm.
but don't work. I mean, don't play too hard. You got to understand the nuance
Yeah.
of what that means. I didn't, I just played hard and where I played hard, and like
Mm.
that got me in a lot of trouble. And then the other piece of the culture that I just despised was like I'll never forget. It was May 10th. It would have been 1994, I think. And it was my mom's birthday. It was May 9th, Friday, May 9th. And I had tickets to the opera. I'm not an opera guy. Everybody that knows me knows that, but I was going to try and do something special for my mom. So I bought tickets to the opera downtown in Detroit and had a dinner reservation on Saturday, and we were going to go. And I get a call in late morning. It's like, hey, Mike, this is my boss's boss, right? Big deal.
Mhm.
Calls me up like today. I'd love to punch him right in the face because he was such a dick, right?
Yeah.
So he says, "Hey, Mike, listen, we're gonna need you to go home, pack a bag, and get on an airplane and get to Minnesota for tomorrow because we got a sales trade conference, and somebody in the Minnesota office can't make it, so we need you to get over there and whatever." And I'm like, like I kind of can't, like sorry. And this was a big deal that I would say no,
Yeah.
right? Like it was an honor that I was being asked, and I'm like,
Sure.
So anyway, that was a big black mark because I did say no, and this is after my boss came into my cube and busted my business
Yeah.
over it, and like really worked me, and so then, but then the other thing was they'd always do functions like in the evenings on the weekends.
Yeah.
Like stuff wasn't like it was mandatory. Like you had to be there. Like if you didn't show up, like, and so like I was always like, I don't want to hang out with you guys. Like I got all my friends. I want to go party with my buddies. I got, like, and so I was terrible and had a horrible attitude when it came to that kind of stuff. And there was I mean, I blistered my boss at the wrong moment, Anyway, I made him cry too, which I always found
Nice.
interesting. Yeah.
Nice.
And anyway, I got fired. And so I was just doing nothing. I had a little bit of dough saved up, not a lot, little bit of
Mm.
dough saved up. And so I took a job at a golf course. I was actually living with Sunan's parents,
Yeah.
and then long story short, I was at my grandmother's funeral, and a colleague of my mom's asked me what I was doing, and I said nothing. And he couldn't comprehend that. That didn't compute the nothing piece.
Yeah.
So anyway, he invited me to come up and work on that research project at Michigan State. And so I connected into that, and then I went and applied for the job at BIGGBY. And
Yeah.
so, I think, I've spent a lot of time thinking about why you and I sort of connected in the way we
Yeah.
did. And I think a lot of it was this concept of just doing it unconventionally
Yeah. For sure.
and not playing quote unquote by the rules.
For
And
sure.
that there was a lot of we had a lot of camaraderie is maybe not the right word,
Totally.
but
Totally.
around that, it's like we're gonna do it our own way. And
Yeah.
I mean, in many ways, we're still like that today.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, playing by the rules, and I don't mean cheating. That's not what I'm talking about. But playing by the rules will get you just about average.
Yeah.
You know, is the thing. Like the upside in that is just such a yawner, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And also like just this whole idea of thrill in life, you know what I mean? Like having thrill in your life
Yeah.
is has always been important to me, will always be important to me. Like the other stuff just sounds way too boring, you know.
Yeah. Well,
So I think we're comrades in that as well,
yeah.
completely. You know,
Yeah.
the other thing that I think is I'm pretty sure both of us were in trouble all the time in some form or
Oh, yeah.
another
Yeah.
as kids, right?
Yeah.
And you know, like in those days, it'd be like, yeah, that Johnny, you know, he's always getting in trouble, kind of thing. But that turned out somehow magically to be an asset that we bonded over.
Yeah, no doubt about that, you know. And my mom, bless her, you know, just
She's
she's
prayed
very
every
generous.
day for you.
She's just generous now because she talks about how I was just bored, you know. I'm like,
Yeah,
well, okay, that's the nice way to say it,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
But yeah, I agree with that. You know, and I also think there was just I think that life had always been pretty darn exciting for both of us,
yeah,
our upbringing, and just
yeah,
I mean, trying to continue that. Like
yeah,
that
for sure.
wasn't going to be a corporate 9 to 5 job. I mean, there was no way in the world for either one
Totally,
of us, right? And so
totally.
trying to keep that trajectory of interesting and exciting and adventure, as you mentioned, like that was important. And I've said 100 times that all I'm trying to do is wake up and have interesting stuff to do in the morning, you know?
Completely.
Yeah. We got a cut. It's 3:50.
Yeah.
So we'll pick it up. I mean, that we just covered the early origin story of the company in great detail. I think that's awesome.
No,
Um,
it's good.
and I think we'll, I don't know, we'll pick it up from there and it's probably not as detailed, but who knows? There's parts of this story
Why
that,
not?
yeah,
You know,
we're just entertaining ourselves here.
completely. But you know, there's today, you know, like we're doing these farm direct trips and stuff like that. But part of the attraction for the owner operators to come is just to have access, and that is like these things, these thoughts, these
Yeah.
happenings are really kind of interesting to them, you know?
Yeah, and they should be, I guess, I mean, I would think so. And that's a big part of what I want to do with this video series is like document all this stuff,
Yeah,
And for me, so much of it is just about alignment.
yeah,
Let's get this stuff out there. And you know what? If you're a prospective franchisee and you watch this stuff and you think, "Oh, wow, I kind of want to be a part of this thing," or you're like, no way.
oh,
Cool. Like
total
that,
shit. Yeah,
that's working, like if people watch this stuff and don't want to become part of our organization, that's a win, right? That's a win for everybody.
a big win, a
Yeah.
big win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll just keep going. And I thank you for your time. I don't know